Tekken Master. Woo, and Sonic. Whoa! I don't think we've ever seen that before.
We have.
Yikes!
We're seeing bareheaded human Sonic Fox.
I thought his brain would be exposed there.
Within gaming, fighting games especially, there are moments where players' aura are on display to the utmost degree. Whether you consider Smash a fighting game or not, the series has had its fair share of similar moments, and Smash Ultimate is definitely no exception. Within this video, I'll be discussing the moments within the history of Smash Ultimate where it felt like a player's aura was on such a high display that there was almost like an energy shift in the room. First, I must start off by taking you down to Orlando, Florida for the Smash World Tour. All of the greatest talent for the game were gathered for this event, and everybody knew that people were going to be trying their absolute hardest to win because the prize at the end was massive. Not just that, but a global tour had led up to this moment of tournaments that took place from Argentina to, California. And so people were really dedicated to doing well at this tournament. And you knew that there were definitely going to be some breakout stars, but there were also going to be people who were resident talent that were just waiting for the opportunity to get that big prize at the end. Among the talents in attendance, Spargo was obviously one of them. And he was just crushing at the time within the metagame, being either rank 2 or rank 3, kind of going back and forth with Tweak, but a lot of people had kind of decided that Spargo was above Tweak, and Tweak's placement at this tournament wasn't going to help that. He didn't do very well, and Spargo was kind of crushing every single person in his path. Even people who some thought maybe he was going to be unable to beat, he really made swift work of. There was a dark threat, however, brewing in the waters, that being Cosmos. Cosmos is an interesting player because you don't know at any given tournament if this is going to be the greatest player you've ever seen, or if this is going to be a player that makes you regret even watching the tournament. And this was one of the tournaments where he was on his greatness era. Cosmos was making swift work of a lot of the best players in the world, and I think a lot of people really began to take notice of this. One of which having to be Spargo, because he would eventually have to go up against Cosmos. And let's just say it definitely didn't go how Spargo was expecting. Spargo took the first game, but Cosmos surprisingly took the second game pretty decisively with a roll in using foresight on the limit cross slash in order to get a charged forward smash in which the commentators began kind of making fun of Spargo about.
She said, nuh-uh.
Oh, but you thought so.
Nuh-uh, that's what they kept saying. After this match, you could tell that Cosmos was really starting to feel himself, and he was like, man, I could really defeat Spargo. I could do this massive accolade and be that much closer to winner's side finals against MKLeo. But Spargo was thinking the exact opposite. People say that the eyes tell what the mouth doesn't, and in this situation, we couldn't tell what Spargo's mouth was saying because he was masked up, but the eyes told more than enough.
Still on cloud, still on stage. Oh, Spargo. That's when Spargo is like, there's no way I should be losing this. You can tell.
Somebody just hearing about this may just think, so what? The kid rolled his eyes. It's not like that's just gonna turn the tides. Turning the tides would be an understatement of what would go on to happen after this.
Jesus.
Lord have mercy.
68%.
And with that, although Cosmos still had one more game, everybody knew that this was pretty much over at this point. There was nothing that Cosmos could have really done to salvage it. And although he would go on to defeat Spargo later on in Losers Finals, nobody will remember that nearly as much as the crazy eye roll that kind of led Spargo into the Winners Finals. Our next story will take place the same year, and it will still involve Spargo. However, this was not at Smash World Tour, but rather Super Smash Con Fall Fest Edition. Before we get into the next one, please be sure to like and subscribe, because only about 12% of the people who watch are subscribed and 88% aren't subscribed. And it is completely free to subscribe, and it would mean a lot to me as a small channel. Thank you for that, and let's just get straight back into it. At this point, Spargo had made it to Grand Finals, and his foe, Light, had always been kind of known as a pretty good player, but he wasn't necessarily a major winner. And this was even crazy for him to have made it this far. But Spargo was not going to go down without a fight, and everybody knew that going in. Light was also pretty recently signed at this time to Moist Esports, so a lot of people had very high hopes for him, as you know, he definitely wanted to impress his sponsor. At the moment where he had gone up against the ropes, however, Light seemed like maybe there was nothing he could do left to pull through the set. At least that's maybe what Spargo thought. But Light had other plans.
Good Lord, TK.
Yeah, this is looking. Oh, get off of me! Oh my God! Yo,
What?
No, he didn't! No, he didn't!
What?
Yo, what a way to get into the next set right there! Read your whole life right there, bro.
Future sight, bro.
That's Mr. Cleo.
He rolled up his sleeves, which he had done before, but never in such a critical moment like this, and it kind of became an iconic part of Light, really, as a player.
Like one up smash away. Anytime this.
TK, you called for it. He delivered it. Light is your Super Smash Con Fall Fest 2021 champion.
He would go on to be victorious and celebrate with all of his friends in the crowd, and he later would go on to say this in the post-game interview.
You know what's funny? Before we played, like big intermission.
Oh, yeah.
And I look at Spargo and I'm like, yo, do you even get nervous? He's like, not really. And then I started playing him in the set.
Yep.
And I see him doing like panic options. In my mind, I'm just like, you're scared of me.
You're scared.
You're scared of me.
I think once you get to a point like that where you can sense your opponent's feelings and like see right through them and be like, I know you're scared, you have already won. Even if you haven't played the final games, you've already downloaded all the information you need to. For our next moment, we need to head down to Las Vegas, Nevada for Double Down. This was a massive tournament and a massive fan favorite tournament. I've heard many players and spectators alike kind of clamor for this event to come back because of how many iconic moments took place there, and this was only one of many. However, it was definitely one of the most memorable. In the Mexico and Dominican Republic versus Japan segment of the crew battle, it was a very highly contested one, because many people from both regions were really there to support and curious to see which was actually the better region at the time. This was before Japan was as dominant as they are today. However, they were still extremely great. Despite Sonics running through 2.5 of Japan's greatest players and really making it a lot easier for his team as the opening member, it still wasn't going to be enough. And the rest of the team was kind of just getting decimated left and right, which left only their final player to have to somehow defeat the next 3 on the Japanese team. It gets worse, however. Although it was going to be MK Leo, the greatest player in the game's history, who was going to try to stand up against these people, these also weren't just any scrubs he was going to have to face off against. This was going to be Shuton, the only player who MK Leo at the time had never even taken a game off of, Proto Banham, who was MK Leo's demon, who had taken him out before he had gotten Grand Finals, the only player to have ever done that to him at this time, and T, the Kazuya Master, who was a player that everybody pretty much dreaded to fight. And so people really didn't necessarily have high hopes for Leo, as well as the fact that it seemed like he was kind of just joking around because he was playing Joker, no pun intended, who he really hadn't played in years.
They have close encounters, so it is quite the tall ask. I'll tell you one thing that I don't think anybody was expecting: the Joker.
El Joker? He's back?
So people were like, oh well, it's pretty much over for this team. They thought that up until the fact that he defeated Shuton. Him defeating Shuton isn't necessarily crazy, although he had never taken a game off of him before, but you know, you can beat somebody in a 1v1. What was far more crazy is the fact that he then had to enter his next match against Proto Banham with only 2 stocks on the board. Remember, this is a guy that he had not beaten. So this was his bracket demon, and he was going in with only 2 stocks, and yet somehow he did this.
You still can't see him. The back air.
Oh, he did it! That's a mama. There goes that man. That is a bad man.
As insane as that is, that's not even the moment that I'm here to highlight. Now he was going to make it to his final opponent in this path to somehow be able to pull through for his country and his people in this crew battle, T. He only had 1 stock.
It is 1 stock.
Speaking of, wait, I forgot. It could also be Kazuya Mishima.
You think he's gonna try and cheese him? Take it.
Kazuya Mishima.
But T's 3 stocks on the Kazuya may be no match for the greatest player of all time on his greatest old main in Joker. The round starts up, and what proceeds to happen is something I can't even fully describe, so I'll let you just watch for yourself. T defeated him very swiftly and easily, and yet that's not all. He would go on to hit this. This would be a moment that would go on to change the course of Smash forever, and T wouldn't even retire this emote here. He used it the next time he beat MK Leo in a crew battle at Genesis. He would go on to use it when he defeated Riddles in the Kazuya Ditto. This guy loves this emote. Another moment that can't go without being mentioned is in the infamous set between Jazzo and Raflo. These two were both quote-unquote low-tier warriors. Instead, they're actually playing very good characters, but they're characters that don't necessarily have a ton of cheese to them, so they do have to play somewhat honestly. And because of this, they were both kind of underdog talents going into this most recent SmashCon. And they were both on the precipice of making it into top 8, but unfortunately, they had to fight each other to get in. Only one of them could make it, and this was actually brought to a Game 5 scenario.
Last game's upon us right here. Jazzo, Raflo, fist bumps across the board. Kalutena can make some noise. Let's do it.
Game 5. It all comes down to this. Only one of these two is going to make it to top 8. Bit of a Cinderella run for each of them.
Only one of them was going to be victorious, and Jazzo was very determined to show it was going to be him. Just after taking his opponent's stock, Jazzo decided it wasn't enough to just take his stock. He had to hit him with this.
See the look he gave him? Did you see the look? No, I didn't. Did Jazzo just look over him? Jazzo gave him the look.
Why he did it, I don't know. That's what I would say, however, if he didn't say this himself.
If you receive this stare from me, in-game, I want you dead.
Okay.
I almost feel like something like this should be banned. It almost reminds me of the Hungry Box anti-pop-off, where it's like, how are you even allowed to do this? We're playing in the middle of a game and now you're putting me in a genjutsu, you know, and I just don't know what to do. But speaking of genjutsu or mental damage, I think that this can definitely be another moment that must be talked about in that regard, which is going to be at Frostbite 2020. You see, MK Leo had been knocked into the loser side very early by a child by the name of Prodigy, who has now grown up and calls himself Kurama. And this was an unknown Mario player who was seeded to do terribly at this tournament, obviously lose to MK Leo, who was like the undefeated GOAT at this time, and he 3-0'd MK Leo. So everybody was like, what?
What just happened? Prodigy! Oh my goodness!
That was crazy because MK Leo had just been off the back of getting grand finals at Genesis. So he gets 3-0'd by this kid, and then he makes the craziest losers run that has ever happened. And he makes it all the way back to grand finals versus a man who is a great friend of his in Maister.
Let's go grand finals. MK Leo versus Maister. Great friends, starting off with the taunts.
Now, I don't know about you, but if I see my good friend in grand finals, we're gonna really have fun with it. I know that you know, MKLeo had seen other friends before in grand finals at locals. For example, when he fights Big Boss in a grand final at a local, he goes Ryu and Big Boss goes Ken, and I feel like that's just a cute and fun thing to do with your friends. Unfortunately for Maister, they must not be close enough friends. MKLeo would go on to beat Maister 5 games in a row with Joker violently. And then he said, you know what, is not enough. I need to embarrass this man even more. And fortunately for him, Sakurai made that possible. You see, only 2 weeks prior, a new character had released in the final character to be released for Fighters Pass 1, Smash Ultimate's first DLC. And that character was called Byleth. And so MKLeo was like, you know how I can really just embarrass this guy and ruin his whole life? What if I beat him with the new character? The character, mind you, that I barely have any time to play because he just came out. Nobody knows how to play him. He just released. He did. You know, I can't speak for Maister, but here's what I will say. If any friend of mine ever did this to me, we're no longer friends.
We could lose the game, but upside. Oh, and that's gonna be it.
But Maister would surely go on to have his own aura-filled moment. Possibly the most aura-ful moment in all of Smash, with him using literally telekinesis because his aura was so powerful, the world and environment around him began to change. You see, when we go back to SmashCon in 2022, Maister made it all the way and climbed to Grand Finals, which was pretty shocking. You know, not many people had expected or seeded him to make it this far. Peers of his like MKLeo, Light, Gluttony, Tweak had all been slain far before Grand Finals of this tournament, and people were pretty shocked to see Maister there. He was up against the winner side talent in Onin, who people really didn't even see making it this far, let alone from the winner side, defeating every one of the players I've mentioned thus far. Unfortunately for Maister, he would go on to get brutalized the first 2 games, meaning that he would have to win 6 games in a row if he wanted to somehow bring this tournament home from the loser side of things. He knew this wasn't impossible, however. Again, I just mentioned that his friend MKLeo had done it to him only a couple years prior at Frostbite, and he had done it with a new character as well. I think this gave Maister an idea. You see, there was a somewhat new character at this time that had been released by the name of Sora. There was only one issue with Sora, and it was that he was awful. Nobody had ever won a single game with Sora before in the history of mankind. There was a Twitter stats page called Sora Stats that was 100% dedicated to tracking every single victory Sora had ever gotten across all Nintendo Switches, and unfortunately it remained at 0% for the entire character's existence. You could put a newborn child near a controller and you could have literally over 10,000 hours on Sora and you would still somehow be defeated because the character was impossible to win with. With all of this being said, Maister made the bold and maybe psychotic decision of picking the character in grand finals of the biggest tournament ever against an opponent that had 3-0'd MKLeo. Although you expect me to say something like, and it obviously went how you expected, he got destroyed, that's not how it went. With the craziest up air of all time, to defeat the Steve Demon that had plagued this game and all of his friends before him, Maister had not only won a game against Onin with Sora, but he had won the first ever game with Sora. This win was so impactful that Maister's aura literally began to essentially use telekinesis to pull the confetti from the machines and make it rain down around him and his opponent. And this was definitely an intentional decision to essentially mess his opponent's psyche up to the degree in which he would go on to win the next 4 games very easily.
But how? How could I have lost to him? Open your mind!
Unfortunately, he did not do that. He would go on to lose the next game, but he really had already done all the damage that he needed to. he had pulled the confetti and he had won the first ever game with Sora. If that's not aura, then I don't know. But yeah, these were just some moments that I felt like needed to be mentioned when it comes to some of the most auraful moments in all of Smash Ultimate. If there were any key moments that you guys think I left out, please let me know, because this is something that I'm really intrigued by, and I think it's a really interesting topic just to see when a player has that kind of shift within them. But yeah, if you guys have enjoyed, be sure to like, subscribe, and see you.
Alright, let's go. Loser.